Hi everyone, I want to show you how I make my mixed veggie sauerkraut. It's a really great food. I eat it with my breakfast nearly every day. I love it so much. And it's really easy to make, so I'm going to show you. Okay, so what you need to make sauerkraut is a big bucket full of veggies. Sauerkraut is traditionally made with cabbage. This has a cabbage base. I've got Napa or Wombok cabbage, a whole head of cabbage. It's underneath all the other veggies there. So you want a clean bucket. This is a laundry bucket, but I wash it very well, and it's made of polypropylene, which is number 5 plastic. So it's food safe. So you just a clean food safe bucket. Now I pre-weigh my bucket. See there, 392 grams. So that's really handy because you need to know a pretty accurate number of how many grams of veggies that you have. Here I've got Wombok cabbage, beans, spring onions, and grated carrot. So you know, you can ferment lots of veggies with a cabbage base, and you add salt. So salt in the right proportions, and there's a few other little things that you do in the process to get it going, and that's about it. So I've weighed my my bucket, so I know how much that is, and then I weighed the whole lot together. So here's my calculations. I've got my bucket and my veggies, the whole lot weighed 2,778 grams. Then I minus the 392 grams for the bucket, which gives me 2,386 grams of veggies. So once I know that figure, then I can calculate how much salt I need. I always do it in grams. There's no guesswork then. I know I've got the right amount. I generally use 2% salt. You can use a little bit more, you know, you can use more or less salt in your sauerkraut, but 2% is a safe level. I have made it with 1.5%, and that's fine too, but I like 2%. I live in a hot climate too, especially our summers, so 2%, you know, is a good safe level. So to get your salt level, you multiply your number of grams of your veggies by 0.02, and that gives me 47 grams of salt. So what I'm going to do with this is, I've got all my veggies all chopped up. I am actually going to add, I'm going to add a few other little things. You can add lots of stuff to your sauerkraut. I often add garlic. This is just really nice fresh garlic that we get from our local Indian market. I'm going to put a fair bit of that in. I really like to make what we call curry kraut too, and you know, I make this kind of a curry kraut version. So this is just some really nice curry powder from my local Indian market as well. It's got a lot of turmeric in this mix, which I kind of like. It gives it a nice color. So I'll put a couple of nice big spoons of that. You can put chili in, you can put ginger in. I'm also going to put in a bit of lime juice, which is really nice. It just, you know, adds to the flavor. I had a lot of extra lime, so I decided to add them in. And here is my salt. So I've got my 47 grams of salt. In this case, I'm using pink Himalayan salt. So I'm going to put that in. Now, usually when people make sauerkraut, they massage the kraut and you know, squash down the cabbage until it releases all of its liquid, rather than really messing about with it with my hands. I tend to just put the salt in, mix it through all of the veggies and let it sit, and over time the salt leaches out the liquid from the veggies anyway. What you want to do is create a brine. So this is a ferment that you make without adding any extra water. It just uses the salt and the natural water from the vegetables, and that creates enough of a brine. Anyway, I'll explain that a bit later. So I'm just mixing it all up. I'm not particularly interested in squashing it all. I will squeeze it a little bit, but just getting the salt really well mixed through is what I'm after. This is why I use a big bucket. because even though this turns out to be a lot smaller amount once it's all wilted down, it's quite voluminous in the beginning, so you need a big bucket so you don't get it everywhere. You can already see the volume has squashed down a bit with that. Okay, well, that's pretty well mixed. I'll give that another mix after it's wilted a bit more. Oh, it smells good. That curry powder and the garlic smells really yum. So that's it. I'm just going to put just a cover over that, just a towel or a breadboard or something, and I'm just going to let that sit. Let the salt and thyme just do the rest. And once that has sat for a while, it'll get really, a lot of the water will come out and there'll be a brine in the bottom. And once we've got enough, once it's generated enough brine, I'm going to pack it into a jar and I'll show you the next step. Okay, so it's been about an hour and a half and my veggies are really quite soft and wet. You can see there's some liquid pooling down the bottom of the bucket, so that's enough for me to pack my jar now. As the veggies start to ferment and they start sort of aging in the brine, even more liquid will come out. But this is a great amount to start with. So I'm just using a really big jar. This is one that I bought from Lifeline, which is a big charity shop near where I live. So it's fantastic. And I'm just going to use my tongs and get all those veggies in there. I have to change sides because I'm left-handed. I also put my potato masher in there and just wash it all down as I go. Oxygen is the enemy of vegetable fermentation. You want to remove all the oxygen that you can, and that's why we add salt to the vegetables. The salt preserves them, but it encourages the brine to form, and the brine actually eventually covers the vegetables, which creates a barrier for the oxygen and yeah, it makes it an environment that can't get any air to it. If you do have your veggies poking up above the brine, you can get mold and probably other forms of spoilage, which we don't want. So packing it down really tight and pushing it down repeatedly throughout the fermentation process helps keep everything under the brine. Now look at all that beautiful brine. So there's no water added to that. That is purely just the liquid for the vegetables. So that's all we need. So what we need to do now is this is a clean cloth. We're just cleaning our jar. I like to use this little silicone spatulas. They're fantastic. With my sourdough starters, I use these to scrape down the sides of the jar. The cleaner you can be, and the more that you can remove from the side of the jar, the better, because any piece of organic matter or vegetable matter on the side of the jar is potential for mold to develop. So there you go. It's really clean. The side of the jar, everything's going to be well and truly under the brine. So what we do now is I've saved the outer leaves of the cabbage, and I'm going to use these as what they call a primary follower. So where's my knife? So I'm going to sort of roughly cut cut this into sort of a very rough shape that will just sort of sit on the top of my ferment. I like to put the sort of the hard bits on the edges a little bit. We're going to put another follower over the top. This is a good initial cover. So what we're going to do is weight this down, which is going to push everything under the brine. So that's our primary follower. I'm happy with that. It's all under the brine. Now, for the secondary follower, so it's just, you don't necessarily have to do this, but I like to do it. It just gives it a bit more stability. I've got this collection of discs that I made. Each of them, they're all different sizes. Each of them are just plastic, so they're number 5 plastic polypropylene, so they're food safe. And I've punched some holes in them and put a slit there. So what I can do is get them inside the jar like that and then open them up and they become a follower. There's nothing wrong with using this plastic in your ferments. It's very stable and very safe. So I'm going to use these. I have a whole lot of different jars, so I use different ones. I'm going to put this one in. And it just wedges in there beautifully. Look at that. Perfect. Sometimes I use two just, you know, to be sure. Put a couple in. Just gives an extra stability to it. Now, all I need is a weight. So I'm just going to pause while I get my jar because I forgot to get that ready. What I use for a weight with this setup is a jar, a canning jar full of water, as full as I can get it. And that makes a really great weight. That water will never leak out. It's well sealed. And I just pop it on the top of my followers and push it down. So I'm pushing that down. You can see that that is a really great amount of brine. It will increase and it will also bubble up. It'll start to become effervescent as the vegetables ferment. It'll take a few days for that to start to happen, but I'm going to record it over the 10 to 14 day fermentation period so that you can see what happens. When you're using this method, you don't have to cover this. You can put a cloth over it and a rubber band or something like that, just to keep any flies out or that sort of thing. But because I live in Brisbane and it's hot, it's Easter Monday today actually, and it's 7:15 in the evening and it's 27 degrees Celsius, so it's still pretty warm weather. So what I do, because fermentation is much better in a slightly cool environment, as I do with my sourdough bread, I ferment my veggies in an esky. Yay! So I have an esky here and I just put an ice brick in the bottom and I change that every day or a couple of times a day, just depending on how hot the weather is. I put my jar in. So it just lives in there. And hope you can see. And I put my lid on. So because I'm covering this up completely, I don't need to cover it with a cloth to keep any bugs out because there's no bugs are going to get in there. So that's my setup. So I've got this little walk-in pantry storage area that I keep this in. Every day I'm going to come down and push that down to release the gas that is forming in the veggies. If you don't push it down every day, it will just keep rising up and overflow and you'll have a big mess. So you just push that down every day. Make sure the brine's covering the veg, and within 7 days, your veggies will be fermented, but I like to leave them about 10 days. That's it. So I'm going to show you some progress as we go and show you the end result as well. Okay, so this is the morning of day 2. I just wanted to show you this. The brine has come completely all the way up to the top of the jar. So that's how much brine those vegetables have generated just on their own with the right amount of salt. So what I'm going to do is just, whoa, see the bubbles? Wow. So the fermentation has started already. We need to do this, push down and get all those bubbles coming to the top. I'm back. It's the evening of day 2, so the same day as that first one. I'm going to push it down again. There's more bubbles coming out. I've put a bowl underneath the jar. That can be handy. Sometimes it's unpredictable. You never know how much brine you're going to get, so putting a bowl underneath just to catch any excess that does overflow is a really good idea. Well, here we are. It's the evening of day 3. And I actually forgot to put the ice brick in this morning. So it's been a warm day and the kraut has been a little bit warmer than I'd like it to be. I don't know if you can see up close, but there's lots of carbonation happening. So when I push on this jar, it's actually pushing down and all the bubbles are coming up from the kraut, which is awesome. And here we are on day 4. Still a lot of carbonation happening. Here is the kraut on the morning of day 6. I've just taken it out and actually taken the weight out, given it a rinse and a clean, and I've taken out the followers as well and just sort of rearranged them because I was getting a few little bits of vegetable floating up. Okay, so it is now day 10. The kraut is looking good. It's smelling really good as well. There's not a lot of carbonation happening. I'm just pushing it down. There's a little bit coming up, but not a huge amount. So it smells really good as well. Usually by day 10, you can tell that it's starting to mature in its flavour, and I generally bottle my kraut at about day 10. You don't have to test the acidity of your sauerkraut, but I make soap as well, so I have pH test strips, litmus paper that I use just to double check, and just to show you, I just tested the brine from this kraut, and these aren't the highest quality paper, but you can see that it's coming out somewhere between roughly about 4 and 5 pH, which is really good. And I have read that you know, between 4 and 5 is a good level of acidity. So the lactic acid has developed really well through this fermentation process. So I just bottle my kraut in these pint canning jars, although you can use any jar that you like as long as it's clean. So I wash these in hot soapy water and then rinse them, and that's all you need to do. They're not sterilized in any other way. Now, I don't tip off any of this brine. I leave it all in, because if you can cover the kraut in your bottles in some of the brine, then that helps it to keep as well. So after I put all of this into jars, it'll all go into the fridge for storage, and it will keep for a really long time. As I'm doing this, I have a mini masher which I use to push everything down. Gee, that smells good. So I just sort of do this process. The last thing I'm going to show you is just these little discs of non-stick baking paper that I like to stick over the top. It just helps them last a little bit longer. Helps create a bit of a barrier for any oxygen getting in. It's not a complete seal, but it just does reduce the amount of oxygen coming into contact with the sauerkraut on the top of the jar. So I'm just using standard old canning lids and rings, just because that's what I have. there you have it. Homemade mixed veggie sauerkraut. Brilliant. I just wanted to say thanks for watching my video. I hope you enjoyed it. It's cool to be able to share my kraut made up recipe with you all, but I really wanted to credit this book for what I've learned about making sauerkraut and other fermented vegetables. This is a really great book, and the method that I use is pretty much based on what I've learned from this book. So Fermented Vegetables by Kirsten and Christopher Shockey. It's a good one. Thanks.